Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Javalabha Girivadhari Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivadhari Janavalabha Girivadhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivadhari Janavalabha Girivadhari Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Nandana Brajagana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Nandana Brajagana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Bhagavacharya Satarya Sri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gauda Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sakor Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki His confounder Srila Prabhupada Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mayapur Dham Ki Navadvip Dham Ki Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jamuna Mayi Ki Ganga Mayi Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakta Devi Ki Shri Shri Radha Golokananda Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gora Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Om Ganda Tamaranda Shakanjana Shalakaya Chakshurumritamena Taismai Shri Gaurave Namaha. So we're continuing this morning our reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 9, the desire tree of devotional service. It is described in the preview that this tree intoxicates the entire world. And a figurative example is that is to explain the mission of Lord Chaitanya. And so I want to take it on text 4. We had glories of Lord Chaitanya and then glories of the Panchatattva. And now we have the Goswamis, 6 Goswamis. And we have this verse, actually it's the same as the verse we sing in, I don't know the name of the song, but it's Shri Rup Sri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Jiva Dasa Raghunath. So very melodious sound, glorifying. So text 4. I also remember the 6 Goswamis, Rupa, Sanatan, Bhatta, Raghunath, Sri Jiva, Gopal Bhatta, Dasa, Raghunath. Purport. This is the process for writing transcendental literature. A sentimentalist who has no Vaishnava qualifications cannot produce transcendental writings. There are many fools who consider Krishna Lila to be a subject of art and who write or paint pictures about the pastimes of Lord Krishna with the gopis, sometimes depicting them in a manner practically obscene. These fools take pleasure in material sense gratification, but one who wants to make advancement in spiritual life must scrupulously avoid their literature. Unless one is a servant of Krishna and the Vaishnavas of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami presents himself to be an offering respects to Lord Chaitanya, his associates, and his disciples. One should not attempt to write transcendental literature. So you have to receive the mercy to engage in this. Obviously, it has to do so it's done properly, so that this, as is described here, this sometimes in an obscene way. It's hard to imagine. Because it's material conscious, it's contaminated. Pushkar. When I go to Florida, I see him. The temple pretty much every day. I go to the temple, and he also talks about how, he got trained up by Prabhupada painting pictures. But he said you can look at some of the paintings you see nowadays where just, just a lot of it's just speculation, and you see details about, Krishna's hair, the poses, and these types of things. That the Prabhupada was very meticulous on how these things were done. They had meanings, just not just put out there, willy-nilly or, speculation. These paintings were done under the, supervision of an authority who understood. So, and so here the stress is given on writing, but just in every activity that we do in Krishna consciousness, there's a purpose, there's a reason, behind the main points of the sadhana that we are engaged in. There's a lot of details, but there's primaries, a lot of principles also, and it's. And even the Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's so many rules and regulations. I have this those books. It's Kushakrata is one of the books he translated. It's about 6 or 7 volumes, and it's like you get depressed if you want to open up one and read it, So I've tried it. I don't read it. I've read a couple of verses, like when we were going to build the temple. I went to that section and what's the proper way to build the temple and what you should look for when you go about even buying the property and how do you inspect the property. So there's unbelievable amount of rules, in relationship to these things. But if you just start reading, like I said, I forget it, But it was just, it's to me, the best description I've heard of it is like the Hari Bhakti Vilas is like a pharmacy. And the spiritual master is the pharmacist. And he can prescribe to a particular disciple, you should deal with a particular disease that disciple has. He has this to draw from. So that's what to me I heard it was a good analogy of it, because it's not everything that's going to be prescribed. We can maintain it. It's just actually impossible. So, but it's there. It's valuable. That's why Lord Chaitanya instructed Sanatana Goswami to write it, because it has a purpose. But how that purpose is applied, it takes the proper intelligence and intelligence of those who are practicing in bhakti. Those outside would never understand it. Prabhupada was sometimes criticized because how it's conservative. So many rules and regulations. But the reality, he said, you have no idea about the rules and regulations. This is just a small tip of it. So text number 5. It is by the mercy of all these Vaishnavas and Gurus that I attempt to write about the pastimes and qualities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whether I know it or know not, it is for the self-purification that I write this book. Purport. This is the sum and substance of transcendental writing. One must be an authorized Vaishnava, humble and pure. One should write transcendental literature to purify oneself, not for credit. By writing such pastimes of the Lord, one associates with the Lord directly. One should not ambitiously think, I shall become a great author. I shall become celebrated as a writer. These are material desires. One should attempt to write for self-purification. It may be published, or it may not be published, but that does not matter. If one actually sincere in writing, all his ambitions will be fulfilled. Whether one is known to be a great author is incidental. One should not attempt to write transcendental literature for the material name and fame. You talk basically about writing here, but actually all types of bhakti is the same. You should do something with a service attitude, not that I want to be glorified because I'm doing a particular activity. That's not the proper action. Here we're particularly talking about writing because that's the context. And even whether it's videos or recording one's class, it's not for oneself to be a great celebrity. It's for the benefit of others. It's a service that one performs that others can benefit from it. And so this is the consciousness. And similarly, writing is the same way. Even giving classes, everybody says the same thing. That the speaker also benefits, because somebody prepares for a class, not just the hearers. It takes both people to do this. The benefit is there on both sides. So, and it's not ironically that just by writing, he's thinking I'm becoming purified by writing this literature. This is for myself, my spiritual advancement. It's it's devotional practice, devotional service, and he's being engaged in this service. He's been asked to do this. Number 6. I take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who himself is the tree of transcendental love of Krishna, its gardener, and also the bestower and enjoyer of its fruits. Lord Chaitanya thought, my name is Vishvambar, one who maintains the entire universe. Its meaning will be actualized if I can fill the whole universe with love of Godhead. This name Vishvambar is also maintainer of the universe. There's names are given to like Varaha when he appeared, and also was given Vishnu. So when his chart was given, Lord Chaitanya is on the horoscope, astrological chart. This is when this name was given to him, because it was seen in his chart that he is non-different than Varaha, these other maintainers of the universe. That was you read that in the Chaitanya Bhagavat and his birth. That pastime is explained. Text 8, thinking in this way, he accepted the duty of a planter and began to grow a garden in Navadvip. Thus the Lord brought the desired tree of devotional service to this earth and became its gardener. He sowed the seed and sprinkled upon it the water of his will. Purport. In many places, devotional service has been compared to a creeper. One has to sow the seed of devotional creeper, bhakti lata, within his heart. As he regularly hears and chants, the seed will fructify and gradually grow into a mature plant, and then produce the fruit of devotional service, namely love of Godhead, which the gardener, Malakara, can then enjoy without impediments. So this is also explained in the Sartha Darshini. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur uses the same analogy. This analogy we hear all the time. That the gardener, and he uses the analogy that he goes out into the garden, he sees the trees or the mango tree, and he sees, okay, this fruit I can pick, this one will be ready tomorrow, this one will be a week from now. And so he picks the fruit, he brings it in, and the cook prepares it, for the king. And similarly, the same way as our creeper grows, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his pure representatives see whether the fruit is pure and ready to be picked. See, and Vishwanath Chakravarti said at one point, if we get to the stage of bhava, and we go to that universe where Krishna's pastimes are being enacted, because going back home to Godhead, first one has to be born in the womb of a gopi. You got to be born a gopi. You don't go back to Goloka Vrindavan and be born. You're born in some universe by some gopi. If you're going to be a cowherd boy or whatever your relationship is, maternal friendship, and then Krishna takes you back. So when you take birth there, and the Ganga Samhita this is actually given a nice description how all the different cowherds around Vrindavan are, just like Nanda, they were on one side of the Yamuna, and at one point they crossed the Yamuna and they moved. All the different cowherds, they all came and they congregated all in Vrindavan. And so they all brought their gopis, their daughters, from all these different locations. And they all, all in Vrindavan. It was all in the, it's like 64 square miles. It's a huge place. So they all congregated in one location. And so Krishna, we see these different pastimes where he steals the clothes of the gopis or whatever. So these are the gopis and stuff that come from different, and the numbers are just astronomical, the amounts. But you're taking birth there, and you're already in the stage of bhava, and you're absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So your fruit is ripened. But so you're in a kind of spaced out Krishna conscious bhava of prema, and then some person will come by and see who are you, and introduce themselves, and in the case, the description is talked from the point of view of a gopi, that I'm so and so gopi, and I'm from, this is my father, and this is, but and so, but I'm spaced out because all I can think about is Krishna. They all have heard about Krishna growing up. They all know about who Krishna is, that these pastimes that Krishna is killing this demon and that demon. His glories are being spread, But I can't seem to get him out of my mind. So then that particular Rastika devotee will take that person. Well, I got somebody I want you to meet. And they'll bring that person to Radharani. So, or one of her Sakis. So this is the process of how the fruit will bear, and then once your fruit of devotion has reached that stage, then you will be united with those other devotees, pure devotees and engage in devotional service along with him in whatever capacity that you develop, whether it's a cowherd boy or a gopi. Could be Sanchi Ras is a cow. Some of the jobs, like the flute, is already taken. But I'm sure if some way, somehow, if you felt such intense desire to be a flute somehow, but some way, because Krishna has a few flutes, but for a moment or somehow Krishna could make that arrangement in some time. Number 10, all glories to Sri Madhavinda Puri, the storehouse of all devotional service, and to Krishna. He is a desire tree of devotional service, and it is in him that the seed of devotional service first fructified. Purport. Sri Madhavinda Puri, also known as Sri Madhava Puri, belonged to the disciplic succession of Madhvacharya and was a great celebrated sannyasi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the third disciplic descendant of Sri Madhavinda Puri. The process of worship in the disciplic succession of Madhvacharya was full of ritualistic ceremonies with hardly any sign of love of Godhead. Sri Madhavinda Puri was the first person in that disciplic succession to exhibit the symptoms of love of God, and the first to write a poem beginning with the words Ayadina Dayadrad Nata, O supremely merciful personality of Godhead. And that poem is the seed of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cultivation of love of Godhead. Wow. And even his pastimes of, Gopal, and the rice and all those stories about sweet rice, and those are also, it'd be like, in a line, it'd be like talking about Srila Prabhupada now. His pastimes, individuals who actually didn't meet him, or those who had actually, like Nityananda, who actually had met him. So they were had first-hand knowledge of these pastimes of their god brothers, or like Ishwar Puri and Srivas Thakur. Actually, they celebrated Ivas Puj at his Dvaitacharya's house with Haridas Thakur. So they would hear these stories, of Gopal, and these actually, I don't know if they actually happened in their lifetime. That probably might have pretty well happened. And I don't know how long Madhavinda Puri actually lived. I think at one point it's described that some of his disciples, after he left the world, they came and served Lord Chaitanya, who initially did not want the service. Yeah, he did not want it because he felt that, they were disciples of his, they were his god brothers. It's his guru's god brothers. And, but based on the instruction of Madhavinda Puri, told them, you to serve Lord Chaitanya. So that they were aware of each other on the planet, even though there's no mention of Lord Chaitanya ever associating or meeting with Madhavinda Puri. So you can infer that they were actually on the planet at the same time. So these pastimes of pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, they're very relevant. Within the past 20 or 30 or 40 years, these pastimes were that close to there and relishable by all these devotees, and talked about. Okay, so the seed of devotional service next fructified in the form of Sri Ishwar Puri. And then the gardener himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became the main trunk of the tree of devotional service. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhash, Sri Ishwar Puri was a resident of Kumarhat, where there is now a railroad station known as Kumarhat. Nearby there is another station named Hali Sahara, which belongs to the Eastern Railway. This railway runs from the eastern section of Calcutta. Ishwar Puri appeared in the Brahmin family and was the most beloved disciple of Sri Madhavinda Puri. And the last portion of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Achalita 8, chapter 8, text 28 through 31, it is stated, at the last stage of his life, Sri Madhavinda Puri became an invalid and was completely unable to move. And Ishwar Puri was so completely engaged himself in the service that he personally cleaned up his stool and urine. Always chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and reminding Sri Madhavendra Puri about the pastimes of Lord Krishna in the last stage of his life. Ishwari Puri gave the best service among his disciples. Thus Madhavendra Puri, being very pleased with him, blessed him, saying, "My dear boy, I can only pray to Krishna that he will be pleased with you." Thus Ishwari Puri, by the grace of his spiritual master, Sri Madhavendra Puri, became a great devotee in the ocean of love of Godhead. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Guru Vastika prayer, "Yasha Prasad Bhagavat Prasado Yasha Prasad Nagati Katopi." By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. It is by the mercy of the spiritual master that one becomes perfect, as vividly exemplified here. A Vaishnava is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if he appears to be an invalid, this gives a chance to his disciple to serve him. Ishwari Puri pleased his spiritual master by service, and by the blessings of his spiritual master, he became such a great personality that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as his spiritual master. Srila Ishwari Puri was the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But before initiating Lord Chaitanya, he went to Navadvip and lived there for a few months in the house of Gopinath Acharya. At that time, Lord Chaitanya became acquainted with him, and it is understood that he served Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by reciting his book, Krishna Lilamrita. This is explained in the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antikanda, chapter 11. To teach others, by example, how to be a faithful disciple of one spiritual master, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, visited the birthplace of Ishwari Puri at Kumarahat and collected some earth from his birth site. This he kept very carefully, and he used to eat a small portion of it daily. This is stated in the Chaitanya Bhagavat Adikanta, chapter 17. It has now become customary for devotees following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to go there and collect some earth from that place. So there's a couple of things here. It's just the service. The whole process of Krishna consciousness is to develop a service attitude and to purify that service attitude. And we see that when that service attitude becomes purified, here we see the spiritual master blesses that disciple. It's ultimately the service attitude that we have to develop in our Krishna consciousness. It is the ultimate mentality. And then this story, where the first story talked about here is when Ishwari Puri first went to Navadvip. And he had this book here, Krishna Lilamrita, and he asked Lord Chaitanya to look at it. Lord Chaitanya is a scholar. He's a world-renowned scholar. I guess the world as far as any understanding. And Lord Chaitanya had a huge reputation of being a scholar, defeating everybody. Actually, in one sense, he was like an intellectual bully, that he would go around and just challenge anybody. And they had the headmaster of his school, and Lord Chaitanya became one of the teachers there, and there were many teachers. There's a huge amount of, it described everybody would come from all places to learn in Navadvip. And even in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it says, even people from Greece, it is mentioned, would come from, very far. And Lord Chaitanya would challenge, anybody. And if he'd see somebody, if they'd see Lord Chaitanya, he'd be the one, they'd turn around and run the other way, because they were afraid of him. But this is kind of like a setup in a sense, because it's before he goes to Gaya, and then after. So, and he even defeats Digvijaya. And he does it in a secluded place out of respect for him, even though he had his disciples with him. He was able to defeat him, this most learned scholar. He came there with his whole entourage and celebrated, defeated everybody everywhere he went. But Lord Chaitanya, in a secluded place, defeated him. And then the word got out that he had defeated this scholar. And he became even more celebrated in Navadvip as the ultimate, scholar himself. And so everybody would send gifts to the house. He received all types of gifts. This is described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So here we have Ishwari Puri, his understanding that Lord Chaitanya's reputation precedes him, asked him to look at this book. Is there any kind of grammatical errors, But Lord Chaitanya did not want to do that, out of respect. He did not want to look at the book. But Ishwari Puri asked him to do it, and then he did. He looked at the book, and he did find one little thing he said he should change, one correction. And then Advaitacharya looked at it and thought about it and didn't make the change. He kept it as he kept it without correcting it. So a very nice pastime. And then we have the next pastime here where Lord Chaitanya went and visited Ishwari's birthplace. It's very nice. I've been there, fortunately, by the mercy of some devotees. I was able to go with him and on a trip to Navadvip, And there's actually so many places around Navadvip that wouldn't go. They got this. If you go there, they got this Dham Seva. Actually, I brought a brochure this time because the Jagat Guru. I said, you should keep saying every time you go there, you should try to go to some of these places. Just go to the Dham Seva office. Dham Seva office is like service. Then somebody would say, well, I don't want to go there because I'm going to have to do some service. But actually what it is they're serving the devotees. You go there and they'll take with all these places, they'll take you. You have to pay for the car. They'll give you a guide. And this has been there for as long as I can remember, 15, 20 years this office has been there. And one person, the devotees there, has been in the same office all this time. But you go there to get a group of people together, you rent a car, and you go, they have all these places you can go, so many places. And these are one of the places. Even when Lord Chaitanya's, when he took sannyas, he went there one day, just, and it's just nice to visit some of these places. Ekachakra, that's a whole day. We go there for a day, you rent a car, and it's like, I think it's 4 or 5 hour drive. It's a long ways. We went there one time, we were very fortunate, been there 2 or 3 times, and one time we spent the night. It was Lord Nityananda's appearance day, and they had a huge festival, a very nice festival. They were building a temple there. So this place we went, Ishwari Puri's birth site. It was very nice, and I recommend the devotees. It's very easy. You don't have to know. They make a facility there to take you. You can get a group of devotees and take it. Lots of times they'll take you not just one place. If they're close places, they'll take you to 3 or 4 places. A lot of them you have to get in by car. They're just too far away. Plus all the different rivers you got to cross. It's just easier to deal with. It makes it a little bit longer to go. So that's the other pastime here that the worship this birthplace of his guru. And we're talking about how he was an intellectual bully in a sense, very intellectually. That after he comes back from Gaya, that he's completely transformed. Instead of picking on people, and even when he goes to the Ghat, and he would disrupt. They were washing clothes or something. He would kick sand on their newly clean clothes, or even in the water he'd be bathing, and he'd spit water out of his, And so he would be doing all these. Like a child, he was very, very mischief, And of course, everybody would complain to Jagannath Mitra and Sachi, and she said, "Well, not my Nimai. My Nimai would never do anything like that. Typically the mom would not want to think." But after he came back, he had this service attitude that he served all these people at the Ganges. He had, where he would kick over the artik tray of the Brahmins who were maybe going to worship the Ganges. This time he was carrying the offerings. If somebody was washing their clothes, he would pick up their clothes when they're done and carry it on their head and take them home. And so the Vaishnavas saw this huge transformation in Ishwar and Lord Chaitanya. And so even he would walk around in Navadvip, and there's this one pastime where he was just walking one day, and there was this Brahmin, and this Brahmin has, I think, 3 or 4 very famous sons, and I don't know all the names. I can't remember. I'm terrible with names. And he's telling a pastime
about when the Brahmins' wives, in the Krishna book, Krishna first off tries, the cowherd boys are all hungry, and the Brahmins' husbands wouldn't give them anything, and then once the wives found out that he wanted something, they approached him, and they immediately went to see Krishna. So he was telling this pastor, he got to the point where he starts to describe what Lord Krishna looked like. So this is the verse. And he got to that verse, and there's a detailed description of Krishna and the peacock feather in his hair, all the different types of flowers of the forest that he's wearing, his dress, and it just detail. And then Lord Chaitanya just completely loses it, and falls on the ground in ecstasy. And you see, you have the Lord who had a huge reputation as being this extremely intelligent person. But even when he came back, all he talked about was Krishna. Even the students had this mentality, well, they challenged him. It was before he challenged us, now he's deviated from teaching. And so some of them were trying to find fault in the Lord Chaitanya because he's not teaching proper grammar anymore. But the fact that he was teaching, because everything he saw was Krishna. And so they complained to the headmaster about Lord Chaitanya is not teaching, us grammar. We're going out and he's not giving us proper instructions, And so I can't use Ganga Das. I can't think of the person's name as the teacher. So he talked to Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Nimai, Nimai, he said, well, there's nobody who can defeat me in Navadvip. They've established that already. No one, And he said, I'll go out and today and this afternoon, and we'll give class again, and if there's anything can defeat me, if anything I refute, And so again, he went out, and everything was completely connected to Krishna, and every single verse, every single syllable that he recited. And then at one point he told his students that, this is the extent of my teaching. There's nothing else that I can teach you. So he taught them to actually chant. At this point, you should just chant Hare Krishna. And he teach them by clapping his hands. He taught them how to, they asked him how we should, perform this Sankirtan. And he taught them that process that by clapping their hands. And then now y'all can do whatever you choose. He just released his students at that time, But then some of the other students around were criticizing him about, he would chant, talk about the gopis and stuff. And Lord Chaitanya realized that even at this stage, the respect he was getting, even though he was this huge scholar, there were people who saw fault. We read, I think, last time about, everybody has some qualities and some faults. And if it's up to us to choose whether we want to look at the faults or we want to look at the person's good qualities, we all make that choice. And even at this stage, there were some who would even try to find fault, even though there was no fault there. And he established this fact. And therefore, this leads on to him taking sannyas, one of the reasons why he felt he should take sannyas. Okay, let me just keep on reading here. So two very nice stories there in that purport. Number 12. By his inconceivable powers, the Lord became the gardener, the trunk, and the branches simultaneously. 13. Paramananda Puri, Keshava Bharati, Brahmananda Puri, and Brahmananda Bharati, Sri Vishnu Puri, Keshava Puri, Krishnananda Puri, Sri Nrsimha Tirtha, Sri Sukhananda Puri. These 9 sannyas roots all sprouted from the trunk of the tree. Thus the tree stood steadfastly on the strength of these 9 roots. Purport. Paramananda Puri belonged to a Brahmin family of the Trihut district of Uttar Pradesh. Madhavendra Puri was his spiritual master. In relationship to Madhavendra Puri, Paramananda Puri was a very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, here we get a lot of references from the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Very nice. The following statement. Among his disciples, Ishwar Puri and Paramananda Puri were very dear to Madhavendra Puri. Thus, Paramananda Puri was like Sarup Damodar, who was also a sannyas and was very dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and was his constant associate. And Lord Chaitanya accepted the renounced order Paramananda Puri offered him, the danda. Paramananda Puri was always engaged in meditation, and Sri Swarup was always engaged in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered full respect to his spiritual master, Ishwari Puri, he similarly respected Paramananda Puri and Swarup Damodar. It is described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, another one here, Anjalila chapter 3, 171 through 172, that when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first saw Paramananda Puri, he made the following statement: "My eyes, my mind, my religious activities, and my acceptance of sannyas order have now become perfect, because today Madhavinda Puri is manifest before me in the form of Paramananda Puri." The Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anantya-lila 3, text 175, further states, thus Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exchanged respectful obeisances with Paramananda Puri, who was very dear to him. Paramananda Puri established a small monastery behind the western side of the Jagannath temple, where he had a well dug to supply water. The water, however, was bitter, and therefore Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed to Lord Jagannath to allow Ganges water to come into the well to make it sweet. When Lord Jagannath granted the request, Lord Chaitanya told all the devotees from that day hence, the water of Paramananda Puri's well should be celebrated as Ganges water. For any devotee who would drink it or bathe in it would certainly get the same benefit as that derived from drinking or bathing in the waters of the Ganges. Such a person would certainly develop pure love of Godhead. It is stated in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anjalila, chapter 3, text 155. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to say, "I am living in this world only on the account of the excellent behavior of Sri Paramananda Puri." Sri Gora Ganodesika Dipika 118 states, "Puri Sri Paramanando Ya Asid Uddhava Puri." Paramananda Puri is none other than Uddhava. Uddhava was Lord Krishna's friend and cousin. In the Chaitanya Lita, the same Uddhava became the friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his uncle in terms of their relationship in the disciplic succession. Keshava Bharati, we're not going to get through all of this. This is a pretty long purport. Keshava Bharati, I think it's probably, we'll stop right there because I think it's that time, right? This next Keshava Bharati, we'll never get through to him, so we'll just save him for the next class. Thank you very much. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Huh? Thank you. You're welcome.